Okay, well, we've got some, what can we say, housekeeping here. It's to the point where games are coming in either unfinished or having to be sort of put on the back foot somewhat owing to our existing schedules. So we don't actually have any launch day or embargo coverage for Dying Light the Beast. For a couple of reasons there. Features missing from PC, which we'll talk about shortly. Xbox code not being available. But we're going to talk about what we can talk about. Alex, you spent the day with Dying Light the Beast. You've got a lot to talk about here. You've sent a lot of clips our way for our perusal. So let's talk.
Yeah. So, as Rich discussed, missing features from the PC version right at launch, which is kind of what made us hold our hand on the coverage, like a full coverage, because we'd be having half the story out and then the game would be patched at some point and we'd be missing a large part of that story. So we decided to compact it into DF Direct here, but still a lot of information that I can go through. The game is at launch missing all the ray tracing features that were there in Dying Light 2. The game was scheduled to have them. I'm pretty sure pre-release builds of the game possibly did have them, and then they were removed. So when you get in game now and you go into the main menu, the options menu there, the settings for things like global illumination, shadows, and reflections, as well as flashlight now do not have the ultra setting, which would previously turn on ray traced versions of all those things. Those will be added post-launch. There's a note out there by Techland saying they wanted to make sure that they were polished and ready, and they weren't in time, and it'll be added in shortly. But still, you can load up the game right now and play it. And actually, I think it plays really, really well, barring a few caveats that I'll get into later. One thing you'll notice right when you get in the game, depending upon your PC, in the main menu, right above, I think like the new game button, you'll see pre-compiling shaders. It's super brief on the 9800X3D. Blink and you'll miss it. And I'm pretty sure on a lower end CPU, maybe you'd see that for longer, but the game does do at least a opaque pre-compiling step. Getting in game, without talking about any of the graphics here, without ray tracing, this is next to something like Doom the Dark Ages, one of the most fluid frame time experiences I've had in a long time, covering Digital Foundry games. Like, seriously, just running around outside, you're not right now seeing 9800X3D DLSS for quality mode, max out settings without ray tracing, VSync off, reflex off, super fluid frame times, just like 150 FPS, little tiniest of little things that are like going up to like 6 milliseconds or, like 10 milliseconds every once in a while, not even very commonly. It's a very fluid experience there when you have an unlocked frame rate actually currently in the game. So that was like my immediate impression. I only caught one instance of one frame time spike during my entire play, and I sent the clip to Oliver, and it's going to be going on right now. It was like one frame time spike, and that was about it. I played the game for 3 hours. That is a very different experience than, for example, Borderlands, which we talked about last week, where it was immediately apparent something was wrong. Here, did not have that impression at all. So I'm playing the game without ray tracing here. I was playing it at 4K, locking it to 60 just for the purposes of YouTube. It was running super fluid, and I actually thought it looked, without ray tracing, barring a few things that I'll talk about, really, really good. And actually, the lighting I thought was a lot better than what I saw back in 2022 in Dying Light 2. And at first I wasn't sure what I was seeing. You just like look in any area, there's a lot of indirect shadows underneath things, like larger structures. There's bounce lighting in areas that has directional attribution to it. Essentially, like usually with probe lighting, directionality is lost, but here it's still in the image. And it actually looked pretty good. It wasn't getting a lot of the fine detail, of course, but it was hitting all like the larger structures. And then I went up to a couple of puddles. And when you look in a puddle, you'll see that there's screen space reflections for any of the local objects or things within the local field of vision. But then when you move out of screen space, you'll see that actually there's still like some color and shapes in there that line up with the environmental geometry. But I was just like in random locations. I wouldn't expect that to be the case in a game that uses cube maps, for example. And then I went into this one courtyard here. And when I look down on the puddle in the courtyard, there's like trees around me. There's like buildings with a variety of sizes and shapes on them. And I look around and I look in that puddle and they're like, oh, there's like cubed versions of the geometry in the puddle. And I looked at it also like the indirect lighting in other areas, and there's kind of like cube-like outlines. If you actually look, cube-like edges in some of the indirect lighting, especially within the shadows. And based upon that, and the fact that it lines up pretty well with the world lighting, a lot of the reflections, I actually think we're looking at some sort of form of like cone traced voxels or something like that for the indirect lighting here, and Dying Light, the Beast. And it's pretty different, and that's a pretty large change up both visually and technologically in comparison to what we had in the base Dying Light 2 game in 2022, where there was a huge upgrade visually to turning on ray tracing. And here we don't have ray tracing at launch here, but I imagine that when you do turn it on, the biggest areas you'll see differences in will be in smaller objects, and as well as more detailed reflections. But here, I actually think the lighting looks pretty darn good, all things considered. You go in any one area and you'll see a lot of indirect shadows, surprisingly okay bounce lighting. It's just really indoors that you see issues. And in indoor sections, send also a video to Oliver here. Indoor sections, like character models, can look a bit weird in cutscenes in indoor sections if they're not directly lit. They can just look kind of weirdly glowy. You'll also see in a lot of indoor areas that the lighting is just handled by spotlights that they'll turn on and off the shadows from them as you get closer. And so it kind of looks awkward as you walk towards objects and all the shadows just kind of pop in more or less. And that doesn't look too great. As well as in a lot of the outdoor scenes, sometimes at night, which I'll talk about in a second, you'll see a lot of non-shadow casting lights. They're just kind of like, they almost look like they forgot to click shadow casting for them, because it's just like, there's only one light in the scene. Why is it not shadow? It's a little bit bizarre, but you can see that occasionally. But overall, I think the game looks pretty good, even without ray tracing at the moment. And it ran really well. And one thing I also want to talk about is that nighttime in this game is very much so like nighttime in real life outside of a city, especially here since, it's post-apocalyptic. There isn't any like city lighting anymore. It is incredibly dark. Like you cannot see anything, only like what your flashlight shows in front of you. And it is hella scary. It is very well done. It's a lot scarier, I would say, than Dying Light 2 is in the night sections. And it was also very hard. The game seems to be a bit harder this time around in terms of both navigating as well as you take quite a bit of damage and your weapons degrade pretty quickly. So you have to be pretty careful. But yeah, all that good stuff. I think it's a great experience, even without ray tracing right now, but I think it's going to be a better experience, hopefully, when ray tracing gets in there. But still, there's still some issues to talk about. One issue I'd found with the launch version of the game is that all of the upscalers that I could try out on an RTX 5090, for example, all had issue with the game's screen space reflections. Basically, as you're seeing here in this IQ comparison, the only image quality treatment that doesn't kind of resolve the SSR in some sort of like speckly and kind of way that doesn't handle light transitions very well is the game's TAAU. I don't know why that is, but that is the way it is at the moment. I couldn't test FSR 4, which the game supports through driver upgrading. So that was one issue. Another issue that I found is that when you play the game with reflex on, so that means if you're using DLSS 4 or DLSS 3 frame generation or whatever, or just playing the game unlocked with reflex on, it causes very problematic frame times. As I was showing earlier, if you play the game with VSync off and just run around with reflex off, the frame times are actually pretty sweet. They're awesome. The game runs very fluidly. But as soon as you turn reflex on and run around any area of the game, you're going to be like the frame time kicking up constantly to like 14, 15 milliseconds repeatedly for no good reason. And the game starts to look very non-fluid on anything of a VRR display. You'd have to cap it, which takes out the whole point of using reflex in the first place. And it kind of makes frame generation, at least on the NVIDIA side, which I did test, superfluous. You can't turn it on without the game looking really, really dodgy. So at the moment, that is a bug. Definitely, reflex probably shouldn't be doing that at all. And it doesn't look very good. But other than that, I think it was a pretty great first experience. I didn't get to test lower end kit, but based upon the 9800X3D having no frame time issues, usually it shows frame time issues that other CPUs have just in a lessened form, but it didn't have any here of meaningful notes. So I think it should be pretty good on other systems as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, performance. It's interesting because obviously for YouTube purposes, you capture 60 frames per second for doing image quality comparisons and whatnot. However, unlocks performance on the 5090. It's like north of 130 frames per second in 4K DLSS quality. So yes, it is performant. It is fast, and the frame time line there would that every game be that. But that reflex thing is certainly a weird situation, right?
I've seen it before in games. Well, reflex. So one thing that reflex will do is it will turn off all frame queuing. Yeah. And some games, not all, but some games have problems when that is the case. They weren't designed around that, and they hide a lot of stuff. So maybe that could be the issue. Maybe the engine isn't very good reflex. I didn't try Dying Light 2 with reflex on ever, so I don't know. But that could be an issue engine side rather than an issue with reflex.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is a shame we can't talk about ray tracing because, it's ultimately when you've got that much headroom on a 5090 at 4K, you kind of want to use it potentially for improved visuals, right? And certainly some of the issues you've pointed out in terms of lighting may well be resolved just by having decent ray tracing. And historically, Techland have put a lot of ray tracing features into their games, into Dying Light 2, etc. Mm-hmm. But certainly a promising start, but there is the sense that possibly needed a bit more time to get it right.